Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. So today I want to talk about something very fundamental to all of us, as you can see in the title. And it just has to do with using your mind. 30 years ago, you would never have to make this episode necessarily. But today, it's important. Sadly, a giant portion of the population has to go back to basics to relearn, who they are. Reevaluate everything they think they know. And sadly, for probably a giant majority, they're going to find out it's an empty thing. But it's got a lot of, tools in there. And they, when you used to go into a tool shop in different eras, different decades of whatever century you're in, there were times when the kids would go, the teenagers who were going to be apprentice, blacksmith apprentice or whatever. They at least knew what the tools did. They wouldn't know every technique to use them, but they knew a wrench versus a screwdriver, And I think today, when you empty out the kids' brains of today, and a lot of the adults, of all the BS that they don't need in their brain, that they've simply accumulated over the internet since it started, the void will be palatable, scary, huge. So what I'm going to try to do today is address those of you who haven't filled your mind full of that stuff. Now, we all do a little bit, of course. And when you consciously know you're doing it, it works a lot better. Hey, I'm watching a stupid cartoon. I'm doing this, but I'm getting back to business as soon as this is over. You can still have an adult conversation with somebody else, which means listening to what they're saying, right? Listening to what they're saying and making sure that what you say next is pertinent to the stream of thought that's going on in the room. Sadly, it's a talent that is just dwindling. What's really crazy about it is we go into a room with other folks, and we'll get to the individual mechanisms as well, for sure. You might look at someone across the room, and they're well-dressed, and they arrived in a nice car. They hold down a good position. Perhaps they're even the founder and CEO of their company. And you'll talk to them. Or maybe I just talked to a DA, a district attorney. Apparently he just stopped being that, but it was unbelievable at the lack of ability for this man to have a totally normal conversation. He talked in a nonstop, run-on sentence in a room full of 4 other people and never put a pause for anyone else to talk. And in his own sort of backhanded way, he needed to be the superior one in the room, apparently, at least to a degree. And he just kept, if you said anything that contradicted his stream of thought, he just minimized you, no evidence to the contrary, just didn't want to deal with it, moved on to the next thing. Kept telling us he was 53. It was really weird. Everybody I talk to thinks they're older than me. It's really funny. But he never got to know any of us before he packed up and left. And he's not even the worst, right? I have other friends of mine, super successful. Every time I see them, they're broken records. Everything they say is the repeat of the last thing that they said the last time I saw them. Very strange. So the path I'm going to take on this episode is that let's look at the world before cell phones, before the internet, because that's the stages they went in. And now that's before. And then we'll look at how these devices and how these mediums, as Marshall McLuhan warned us about, have literally destroyed big sectors of people's minds. And then we'll bring it all together at the end and talk about some things you need to make sure that your brain is doing on a daily basis if you want to get anything that you want in life. Either something inside your heart that's just personal, or everything else outside, between family, success, whatever that is, right? If we don't get control of this thing in our head, if we don't realize what we're doing, we're going to keep doing it. A lot of people drink alcohol as a social thing, And then they get more and more alcohol in their system, and they don't realize they're destroying their brain, literally technically thinning out the blood, starving the neurons, and they start dying. Now, they do recreate, but they constantly douse the brain with this sauce. And the horrible thing, and of course, the liver's dying and all kinds of other organs are suffering. The whole vascular system shrinks in the body. And then you start having organ failure. But that's exactly how the cell phone and the internet creeped into our lives. The more we get dumbed down, the less we go and get the next day. The more the alcoholic destroys their brain, the more they have less defense to fight the next drink, to rationalize how and why their life just went to hell. They can't figure it out. The brain cells that would have figured that out have been murdered. And even though they're going to come back, they get continually murdered every day that the drink comes in the system. It's an on-point thing you have to be concerned about with alcohol, but it's also a metaphor for how the internet and cell phones have started destroying the human mind. But let's look at it from an addiction standpoint, because everything I'm talking about has a dopamine drop, an endorphin drop, an adrenaline drop. How many times have you ever seen something alarming in a video online? It's the news, whether it be Telegram where it's pretty pure, or something in the mainstream media. Maybe you like to watch, just like George Carlin said, he likes to watch NASCAR because he likes to see car wrecks. Even though you're seeing something horrible, an explosion in a foreign country that's massive, people are probably dying that moment that explosion occurs. At the same time, your body is rewarding you with amazement. Oh my gosh, look at that. That's the biggest explosion I've ever seen. A part of you is excited deep down inside, but you can't admit it, even though you're watching and witnessing the death of thousands. I can definitely assure you that the folks that create those events understand that mechanism. It's sick, and we have to be very careful how we perceive things. But let's start at your brain. A long time ago, I made an episode called Left Brain, Right Brain. It is a great way of talking about how to separate the conversation in a way that we can have a conversation about the logical mind, the survival mind, the fight or flight mind, and the luxury mind that once you get your world situated, once luxury becomes the benefactor or the byproduct, you're the benefactor of a great society that is, for the most part, peaceful. You then get to develop your right brain. Do you think there was a lot of artists in the middle of a wartime era where everyone's suffering, famines and all this? We think some guy was painting on the sidelines? I mean, hopefully those people existed in the poverty-stricken, affected areas. But I would wager that only the rich in the world who were causing all of this strife had an artist painting a portrait of someone in the house. It's very important that you realize that. As the world slips into the totalitarian tiptoe, where the first world countries are being convinced that freedom is stupid, this right brain, where most of society in the first world has lived for centuries now, you've had access to that freedom, is going to be erased. And George Orwell's world, the dystopian 1984 world, well, just watch THX 1138 with Robert Duvall. You don't have access to that layer. You don't. But when do these two hemispheres develop, and how do they develop, and why do they develop? It's a very important thing to know where you came from so you know where you're going. Some of us have creative parents. I don't know how creative my parents were, but they were okay. They were very low hum creativity, but at least my immediate family definitely had some creative people in it. But the left brain develops so we can survive as children, right? We're born into this world. We're freaked out. We haven't been here before as a result of our current memory. And so we start figuring out the rules. This is good, this is bad. That hurts me, that feels good. That makes mommy and daddy make sounds that I like. This makes mommy and daddy make sounds I don't like. I ate too much and I puked. Well, I don't like that feeling. You learn all these rules. And instinctively, you do have some probably perhaps genes that are telling you instinctively that's bad, that's good for you. But once all that starts calming down and you start going to a daycare or a school, or you have good parents that are like, this is a crayon, that's a piece of paper. Watch mommy and daddy draw a house, draw a person. Then the kid starts going, whoa, that just changed everything. You just introduced a paradigm of infinity to me. I can draw anything that I can think of in my brain, even mistakes. And it starts branching out into everything else that's creative. Now, when we talk about creativity in this show, I do mention a lot of disciplines off the bat, art, music, all kinds of things, right? But honestly, you'll start looking at situations that happen around you creatively. Well, that was weird. That guy just ran over there. What's going on? And your brain is imagining what could have possibly happened to make these cause and effect things occur in front of you. But then you enter school, modern day 21st century school. I went to a 20th century school system. Well, when I went to school, it was meat and potatoes, man. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Usually empirical truths like 2 + 2 is 4, 2 × 2 is 4, those things. Here's some chemistry, here's some biology, here's some physics, and these things are just, true. Now, we learn later on there's a few nuances to those, but for the most part, you do this calculation and it's going to yield an exact replica of what happens in the real world. But then it gets into the theoretical, which is where I personally, on my sideline, while I was going to grade school and junior high and beyond, I'm studying theoretical sciences on the side, which is where you start getting into kind of a muddy water. This is where human beings think something is happening the way they've described it in a book. And you take that in because you want to learn more about it and you want to maybe advance it to the next level, especially if you're reading a book that was published yesterday. We don't know any more than this. But here's what we know up to this point. All of it could be completely wrong. But you try to go to the next level. Well, that's life, isn't it? Your father and your mother taught you so much. The school system taught you so much back in the day. But then there's life. And, there's no book. There's no manual. You don't have your teacher next to you constantly, your parent next to you constantly. Deciphering, that's weird, right? It didn't happen the way you said. Well, here's why that is, the yada, yada, yada. Nope, it's all trial and error. You're building up your left brain by using your right brain to analyze the information that's coming in, trying to organize it with your right brain, which is very interesting, right? To give it to your left brain to deduce. One of the distinctions I try to make in all my episodes is that you must understand on point that the world out there, it's all chaotic. Everything is chaotic. Yes, we have rules when we drive our cars, but isn't there chaotic drivers that don't know how to drive? They're in their cell phone too much, and the amount of times I've seen guys drive straight into barriers on the 405 because they're on their cell phone, and they just do, $1,200, $5,000 of the damage to their car, and of course they pretend like it didn't happen while half their car is just on the ground. I've seen it half a dozen times. It's a little less now. It's been a while. But we have a chaotic world. So when you dial that back, the probability of, okay, let's say you go back to not necessarily prehistoric man, but maybe the first Homo sapiens that arrive, however they got here. They open their eyes and they start seeing this chaotic world. But they have to survive. That's the challenge. And so the left brain, which is hunting, cleaning, building a shelter, making sure you survive, which blows my mind. We ever did this a long time ago. We figured it out. But then we created universities, school systems. It took a long time to get that to the peasant. Universities were reserved for the aristocracy of society. But once it boiled down to us, it got very powerful. Now all of a sudden, you could do your left brain stuff, but you were also forced to learn an instrument. And you can learn instruments in two different ways. You can learn an instrument, full left brain, copy everyone else's music that was ever written. And then you can start messing around with the fiddle on your own. Well, and let me just make a little song here, and boom, we get the blues or whatever. We get jazz. Russia, when I was a kid, I used to, the amount of information about Russia was really wonky when I was a kid in the 80s. It was mostly propaganda. And then the 90s come around and we start learning more specifics about how they taught their kids in school, what the colleges taught them. And, for the kids that had I don't know what it was, middle class, maybe it's upper class, I don't know. When they had a decent education over there, they learned all the physics and all of the reading, writing, arithmetic to nauseam, to really upper scale levels. But they were also forced to learn an instrument, and they were forced to be some sort of artist. And I always thought that was weird. I thought, oh, wow, I wouldn't want to be forced to do that. And the funny thing is, it happened to me when I was in junior high. No, when I was grade school, they gave me a violin, and I switched from violin to saxophone. 6th and 7th grade, my father, who was a trumpeter, he taught me trumpet. And so it was interesting. My school did the same thing. And what they were trying to do, which is not the way they do it today, it's optional today, and you got to buy all your own stuff today, is learn an instrument, kid. Learn an instrument, because that's going to start developing that right brain of yours. Because even though it's a left brain activity, you're going to start hearing music. And you're going to at least hear other people's right brain creativity through your own reenactment, your own recital of what was written for you. Now, I have an episode called Absolute Mind. And the more I think about it, the more I use it, it is something I want everyone else in the world to have. A lot of you already have it. You may not know it. A lot of you do know it. My definition, and this is my term, is that because I, for whatever reason, just lucked out and kept my left brain going at the same pace my right brain was going, if I may take a couple of years off, but I'd always catch up. While doing this show, probably in year 3 or 4, I realized that something had occurred. I had a new chamber in my brain, which was the amalgamation, the combination, the merging of my left brain and right brain together. And in the middle was this absolute mind. And the way I can describe it to you, and this is quite literal, okay? You walk into your absolute mind. You're a child again. In terms of you don't know exactly how to use this new chamber in your mind. But the definition of it is, and the test, the litmus test to see if you've got a budding one or an advanced one, is that infinity suddenly is a perceivable concept. So I have another episode called The Infinity Blind Spot. And that is that before your absolute mind shows up, when you try to conceive of infinity, it hurts your soul. Okay, think of every number that exists. Positive, negative, percentages. It hurts. Think about the universe. Think about the whole thing existing. Whatever you think it's made out of, just think of the whole thing. Conceive of all the stars. Conceive of the fact that you can't conceive of where the edge is. And it hurts. Your brain shuts down. It gets overwhelmed. Well, in the absolute mind, what ends up occurring is that you can see it. And it doesn't hurt. What actually ends up happening is you start seeing things in a infinite quantum. You take infinity and you quantify it into a packet. It's very interesting. It sounds counterintuitive and it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but that's how it works. You can see your universe in a quantum and a package. And then you start applying, again, I use the ethereal theory. It just makes the whole thing work. Everything that you see in the universe, I can explain. And it's not hard. Okay, there's a little book of physics and it applies to all physics, macro, micro, anything you could think of. So then you can start solving problems that you couldn't conceive of before you had this merge. You must, I think, stimulate your left brain and stimulate your right brain at the same time. So what's cool about that is we usually have a predisposition that we're either right brain or left brain dominant. You're an artist. You like to write poetry. You think in creative ways. You go to an amusement park and you look at a ride and you're like, man, this whole line could be done a lot better, and you're thinking in your brain. Even though it sounds like a logistical analysis, which it is, it's on a creative plane of existence. You notice there was a problem in the first place. That's a right brain thing. You hand it to your left to solve. And then your left goes, you know what, I've seen better solutions to this in the past. Traffic lights are the biggest joke in the entire planet. They're the stupidest mechanical device that we have allowed. I mean, what's the last time a traffic light's been improved? The algorithm that controls traffic. 40 years ago, in our local district right here in Southern California, the only thing that's happened in the last 6 months is that now, when someone's pushing the button to crosswalk, they get the crosswalk light 3 to 4 seconds before we get the green to cross, giving them time to get across the lane so when the right turn people want a right turn, they don't run into a whole batch of people, because we're in a tourist world where when the light changes, it's like downtown New York. You could have 50 to 500 people cross the street in some of our districts down here in the summertime. Okay, that's good. Little tiny micro enhancement. But by God, they're red when no one's there. They're green when no one's there. I think the story was Dan Carnegie, if I remember right. I've told the story once before. I'm going to tell it again. It has to do with the next level of applying your brain. I apologize if I have the mogul wrong. It could be a different mogul, but I think it's him. He was so successful in the United States of America that the U.S. Senate at one point brought him in and said, you have to be breaking the law. He probably was, but whatever. They didn't have anything on him if he was breaking the law. And he said, it's just impossible for anyone to be that successful. Of course, they're not bringing in the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers or JP Morgan, just Carnegie. But apparently the way the story goes is he said, look, I'm going to tell you why I'm more successful than everybody else. He goes, because I can hold a thought in my mind for 5 minutes straight without thinking about anything else. And they all chuckled because they think they've got that capability. The bummer of the story is we don't know exactly what he did next. But what he said was, he goes, look, I'll prove it to you. I'm going to give you a test, he said. And I'm going to prove that you can't think of anything for 5 minutes. And somehow he did it. I don't know how he did. If we had that test, it would be the most amazing thing we could repeat on each other right now to prove that you have cell phone disease, social media disease. Well, they did the test on the Senate floor and they all failed. And he dropped the mic and he left the room. And as far as I know, they never bothered him again. Okay, that's where we are today. But what he could have said today in 2024 is, I can think of something for 30 seconds and you can't. And I don't think anyone in my circles on average could conceive of anything past 10 seconds without having to put something else in there. And I'm not even exaggerating. When I sit down and talk to otherwise successful men who got their money before all this stuff arrived to destroy their brains, thank God. It is like talking to men with children's minds, with bad parents and no education. I don't want that to be the case. We can't afford for that to be the case in this world. The cell phone was interesting. The cell phone in its first probably 10 years wasn't a big hassle. Remember, we didn't have people saying you can't drive your car and talk on a cell phone. It wasn't a big deal. You could hold it up to your head. Nobody was killing anybody on the highway. I was in the Bay Area when these things came out. Luckily, no one called me that much when I had my Toxics brick, but I think it was a brick because it was fairly well insulated before they stopped carrying. For some reason, the digital antennas were awful. The analog antennas were fantastic. It has to do with the quality of the cellular technology and the towers. I think the only thing we ever saw was a car driving slow. But cross over into the 21st century and get to the smartphone. December 2006, Steve Jobs introduces the real first smartphone. You wouldn't really try to type on a BlackBerry while you're driving your car. I had one of those too. But as soon as the smartphone showed up, the law showed up in California. It's still today. You're not supposed to operate a cell phone when you're in your car. My friends still get tickets for doing this. And you're not supposed to put it up to your head. What's funny is when we see that in California, it's 50-50 California citizen plates and foreign state plates, because in their state, they can still do it. But the only reason why you're looking at them is they've driven really bad. And the most dangerous formula of that, which anyone who's new to California and big highways, you have to really watch big rigs and big delivery trucks that are capable of just killing you in a split second if they get out of control. I see it all the time. I see these foreign workers in these vehicles. I followed a car the other day, or truck the other day, probably 100,000-pound truck, and he was like just all over the highway in the middle of the day, just all inside different lanes. And I finally got a catch on his mirror, and I could see him just ba over to the side, thinking he's killing it. Of course, there's no cop in sight. But had he been close to anyone, he would have hit them. And who knows? The worst thing that can happen in jam traffic is you have a crappy driver who overreacts constantly. Something's coming at him and they just pull a right angle turn to get away and they kill 10 people, right? Because they don't have a linear mind, which is the other thing that has died in this process. But I'm going to tell you that there's more to it than just a cell phone causing problems. I mentioned all the triggers in the brain that create addiction. Dopamine being a big one. Endorphins being a big one. What they have done is they have destroyed the quality of your life. They've taken down the value, at least in America, of our dollar. They have congested the whole system of job opportunities. They've allowed age discrimination just to roar like a fire. Okay, so people's quality of life is going down. In addition, people are getting addicted to things they can never get access to. So that brings them down. If you're a young person, what's crazy is everyone's a pervert for a young person. Why? Because they turn on the news and everyone's getting attacked constantly. Everyone's getting raped constantly. Everyone's getting shot constantly. I walked around the corner today to go into a convenience store to get some water. I know everybody in this store. I know two of them really well. One of the guys I know the most came around the corner too. And it's one of those awkward moments where you come around the corner and you're both walking at each other. I watched this guy jump out of his skin. Still pretty light outside. Why did he jump? Because in his mind, he's worried about being attacked in front of the convenience store where a lot of homeless people show up. And a guy walking right at him made his left brain go fight or flight. Once he noticed me, he laughed. He's like, Jesus Christ, you scared me to death. And I just pat him on the shoulder. I said, I'm sorry, man. And we both laughed it off. So, take all these people, and we're not even talking about all this identification problem people have with each other, all the hatred that's being peddled everywhere. All those things make you feel like you're down. Without even consciously being aware of what you're doing, you go to your cell phone and you get a little bump, right? Little heroin. Boom, Facebook. Oh, something like my thing. Boom, Instagram. A text message. Something else. TikTok, whatever it is. You're watching some content. A little tiny video. These little tiny videos that have become super popular through TikTok, and of course it's now big part of Facebook, huge part of YouTube. They didn't have this before, but they have it now. Instagram has kind of always had these little videos, right? It's the worst thing for your brain that could ever happen because it becomes addiction to solve a mysterious problem that you're not solving. No one is focusing on the causality of why their life is on a downward spiral, whether it be real or not unreal. So they go to their phone for a bump. The guilty, they're not even being questioned. No one is saying to themselves, why do I feel this way? That I would have to go off and do all this, drink, do drugs, right? Why we have a big fentanyl problem. in America? Well, yeah, China's bringing it in. They're the cause. But technically speaking, why are you taking drugs in the first place? Why is that an option, right? Some of the most powerful people in the world are dying to these fentanyl overdoses because even with all that power and all that money, they still needed drugs to stay up on whatever they were doing, to get that feeling that is somehow missing from their life. If you buy what they're selling you, which basically means ingesting any of their content, you better have both hemispheres of your mind on, observing that content and discerning it from being gathered in your mind as a truth. Whether it be you hate that thing you saw and you don't like those people that do that, the divide, or it's something that just worries you. Something that makes you have a bias that otherwise you wouldn't have had. I have a new saying, which is, how did we survive, right? All the toys when we were kids that now you can't even make because it would, some kid would find a way to kill himself with it, right? Movies like Blazing Saddles that were, to this day, it's kind of revered as one of the best comedies in world history. Can't make that movie today, can you? How did we survive? How come there wasn't race wars when that movie came out? Because neither the blacks or the whites were so uptight that they would ever feel like it's a personal message. Later we found out, of course, that Richard Pryor wrote the white lines and Mel Brooks wrote all the black lines, They reversed roles. They indemnified the entire script that way. But today everybody's butthurt constantly, aren't they? It's a business to be what they call offended, what I call angry. And I think if you were to say, everybody who claims to be offended, well, I would say over 90% of them are simply trying to extort something out of someone else. I'm offended at work, so I get a paycheck and I get to quit and you get to pay my salary for a year because, I'm just so put out. With friends and relationships, it's just a game at home to be offended so that you can get something for free. A back rub, I don't have to talk to you for a week, blah, 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 blah. It's this horrible cycle of this childish, infinitesimal kind of id brain coming up to the forefront to live this chaotic mess, which is generally a lot of people's lives today, right? I'm going with this cause and effect model so you can see and understand the potentiality of how this stuff is actually occurring in your life when you're trying to have a conversation with someone. What's interesting is the older that you are, there's two things that happen with this phenomenon. You meet a new older person, let's say 45 and older, and they can't have a linear conversation. They can't pay attention in a conversation. They insert questions into a crowd and can't listen to anyone answer before they just see a squirrel and they're gone. Quite literally. The other one, when you get older, is that you have friends that used to have sound minds. And then you talk to them or you watch them and they're just sitting there strung out on their devices. They can't talk. They have the same problem as the random stranger, but you're looking at them going, you weren't this way. Why are you this way? It's really interrupting, any ability to maintain a friendship with you or any type of communication with you. A human interaction with you has minimum requirements, right? The other one I want to touch on, which is sort of a tangent to this, right? It relates to this, but it's a growing phenomenon I've seen in my life, is sort of the, I don't even know what you call them. I used to call them shysters. But it's this group of people that do not want to labor to get what they want. And so they go into minimal criminal enterprises of some sort to try and not work, do a little thing. I'm not even talking about drug dealers. Those are real criminal enterprises. We're talking about fringy little things where they can steal from Peter to pay Paul. But this is growing and growing and growing. As men are getting older in this world, they are, it's a famous old saying, it's better to take a shorter amount of time to do the job right than a longer amount of time to do the job wrong. That's a clever way of saying there are no shortcuts in life, right? You got to just do what you got to do. You got to do that thing if you want that thing. I'll give you a real easy example. Someone wants to be a writer. They want to write a book. And they want to put their name on the front. Well, there's rich people, they hire shadow writers and they don't write a single word and their name's on the front, which should be a crime in itself, right? But if you're just a normal person sitting in your living room and you got a computer, who's going to write that book for you? Nobody. You can chat GPT, they'll figure that out in 2 seconds, right? You got to write your book. You got to do what you got to do if you want that accolade, if you want that thing, you want that success. But I will see guys take days, weeks, years to try and get a little bit of money, right? It's like the homeless guy who's still sound of mind, thinking, well, I'll just make a bunch of money begging on the streets. 12 hours a day. Yeah, it's tax free, but whatever. Instead of just getting a 8-hour day job and making maybe 4 days a week, make the same amount of money after taxes, and they'd have some days off with some benefits and maybe a 401k and whatever, right? But they've convinced themselves that they're a sucker if they go into the system. It's a growing disease in the men of America. I would say, ladies, if you ever hear a guy start talking like that, you should just run for the hills, man, because he's going to crash and burn, no matter how successful he's been in the past, and you'll be tied to him, restarting at whatever age you are when that ship sinks. And men, if you're trying to do businesses with other people, you want to be a partner with somebody, and that's the scheme that they've been following, doesn't even matter if you've done it in the past too. It's not good all of a sudden. You'll waste your time. You won't succeed. You'll lose your money and your time. And time, tell me if there's any way you can get a second back to your life, because I haven't figured it out yet. What you have to also understand, in my opinion, is that all of this is not just accidentally occurring. Let me give you an example. And what I want you to focus on are all these little micro videos all over every social media site. Put a pin in that. How did those things come about? Now, put a pin in that and hold it over there. I was in the video game business for a very long time, but even I didn't know this fact until way later in my career. Nintendo, you may have heard of them, Japanese company. They made the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo. They made Mario Brothers and Zelda, right? And a whole slew of other games that every kid played who's about 10 years younger than me. What I didn't know was that they actually had scientists in lab coats, I think they still have it to this day, who sit and test the brain. They took in every bit of information from casinos and those sounds that casinos make, the old one-armed bandits and the clingy coin noises and all those really voluptuous noises that are very acute in your brain, very sharp noises to keep you awake the entire time as you play, but also to associate those sounds with reward. They make scientific games, which makes them more successful. It's just the truth. They labored. Now, the benefit of their product is pure entertainment. You know, when you start one of those consoles, you're consuming time merely just to fill your soul with some fun time. No crime in that whatsoever. And yes, there's been eras where Nintendos have destroyed families for a short bit. But now we're social media. Social media is not just this thing, right? The one moment when we realized that social media was not just supposed to be this one thing was essentially when the news started incorporating social media into their opinion, their bias, saying, well, so-and-so site said this, therefore I'm reporting on it on the news. Interesting, right? All the fact checkers that should be hung up by their necks for keeping you from medical regimens that would have saved family members, that would have prevented you from doing certain medical routines in perhaps 2020, 2021 to save your life. But you weren't allowed to see that information, so maybe you slipped over the edge and hurt yourself. And that's just one topic. Some of them are getting busted for it. Hopefully we'll have a phase in our near future here where all of them will get busted for this. Now you might say, well, wait a minute. It's not a law. I have to look at this stuff. Okay, touche. Problem. If you live in a little tiny town where you know everybody, you don't need social media. You want to go see Joe? Drive over there. All you got to do is drive by his house and see if he's outside in his folding chair, getting some sun, working in his garage on some old truck, And you just pull in, pull over, whatever. Hey, buddy, what's going on, man? You need help? Blah, blah, blah. You have your conversation. That's real living. But if you live in a big city, well, what you don't know about a big city is you don't know anybody on average, unless you put effort in to go to places and meet people. Ask a kid in my hometown how many people he or she knew in her home, in their graduating class and the classes that were behind them. My high school had 3 classes in it at the time I went to, and they've added 9th grade. I took this card that they gave us laminated with all the names from my graduating class. I think it was around either 105 or 125. I can't remember. I was trying to confirm that with a friend of mine. But I remember going through all the names and saying to myself, have I had a personal experience with this person, that person, that person? Whatever the total number was, there was only 5 people on this card I hadn't had a personal experience with or a friendship with. So I moved to California at 18, only 17, but whatever. And I dated a girl a couple years later who was 18. I was 20. And she just went to school. She was already graduated in Germany, but she went to school here just to see what it was like. Didn't need to graduate or anything. 3,600 people in this school. I know for a fact that she graduated knowing probably about half a dozen people. This is a question I asked for the first 10 years I was here. Well, how many people did you know in your class? Oh, I don't know, about 6. And they switched every major year. You know, you go next grade and you have a summer off, which they used to have. And these kids know 6 more people. So maybe like 20 people by the time they're done with 3 or 4 years worth of school. That's social media for you. That's the problem that social media is solving. I got 500 friends. I got 1,000 friends. Okay. Any mystery why people feel like social media is literally what has to happen for them to have any social interaction with anyone? All of us know probably half a dozen people in our lives who do not get out. They could. No one's locking them in their house, but they don't get out. They just don't do that. And so they're stuck inside. So the only social interaction they have is social media. That's it. And, if they use it in a way that's very similar to the way we would do it in real life, hey, there's no harm, no foul. But what I'm trying to illustrate is there's a lot of pressure to push us all into these social media arteries where they're nothing but these little tiny tidbit videos that have no value to your life at all. Now, at night, you're laying in your bed, you need to unwind, you've had a very productive, normal day, and you're just filling around. I'm not talking about that. I do that too. I tend to watch more than I don't like these little micro videos. Our Telegram channel, which is Deep Thoughts channel, which you all need to join if you want current event stuff. Some of the best mediated current event videos, exactly when something happens. You have the video without a lot of narrative from us, and you get to watch it and make up your own opinion. Well, it depends. You have cycles to spare for the rest of the world. If you do, that's a key location you can go to, just to get in and out quick. There's not that many posts in a day. And we don't over-politic it. Something profound is said. You might see a political video of some sort. So let's say you're like me and you see this. And to some degree, you're doing it. We all have been there. I'm not holier than thou. Trust me. How do we get out of this, but still coexist with people that are in it? Well, it's going to take discipline on your part, of course. We'll get into this, hopefully making it a lot easier. And it's going to take a lot of patience with you and other people. Let me give you a little secret of how we can make any change in your life unrelated to this conversation a whole lot easier. Now, if you're younger, you may not have this experience. And even if you're older, you may not have had this experience yet. But a lot of you have. If you have, you should comment your experience in any generic way without revealing your personal stuff, of course. I will tell you that when you make a mistake in your life where your blood boils in fear that you've made a horrific mistake, you make changes in your life, don't you? So I'm going to give you an anecdote that happened to me. This has virtually nothing to do with our subject today at all. But boy, it relates to what I just said. I was working at a startup in the late 90s. I was a single guy. Life is really dialed in. It's good. And there was a girl at work who I definitely looked at and said, well, that's an amazing woman. Super smart, really pretty. I forget what her name was. And unbeknownst to me, another girl was hired because this startup's going like this, right? She was assigned to send me information through email. Now, I didn't know the other girl's last name. I'd only met her a couple times and we're on a first name basis, right? So this girl starts emailing me. And I think the second girl was making innuendos in an email, very politely, very sweet, about maybe us going out to get coffee or whatever, right? Something, eating lunch. And I think it's the other girl. And so I dive in with both hands into the water, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, I really, the first time I saw you, I thought, wow, you're really amazing. Well, I don't know what I said exactly, but it was something like, hey, yeah, I totally like you too. I'm in. And then I find out I am talking to the wrong person. I'm an extremely empathetic guy. And so I am thinking, oh my God. The other girl was cute, but I didn't know her at all for one, and she wasn't quite as cute as the other girl, and I didn't know what she did, and maybe I should have gone for it. I don't know. But within a couple emails, she figured out what was going on, and she was very intelligent and very sweet. She goes, oh my gosh, you probably thought you were talking to the other whatever woman. And I said, oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. I'm very, very sorry. You and I don't know each other, and I kind of played it off like that. But when I realized I had sent the email, there was this moment when I realized, oh my God, I just sent it to the wrong person. Because I saw another email on my queue from the other girl, and I was like, what? We have two of the same, this was like some name, it was like a big long J name or something, very unique to have two of them in the company at the same time. So what did that change in my system, and why am I telling you this story? Well, from that point forward, put a lot more effort into making sure that I was talking to the person that I thought I was talking to, which was something I needed to change, right? I needed to make sure that I wasn't making that mistake. Now, a lot of you have sent text messages to the wrong person because your text app is all weird. I've had this happen to me too. Nothing horrendous, but boy, I've sent some doozies where no one really knew what I was saying because I was just being flippant. But you get careful about communicating when those errors start happening. So what was actually going on there? Well, my brain mapped a negative to very carefree, flippant practices. And suddenly when I walk into that realm, I'm now careful, right? We all have like hundreds of these things in our past, right? In different areas, right? If you can just simply do one of two things. Notice this pattern of social media, especially. It used to be just the cell phone ringing and everybody feeling like they had to answer. You don't have to answer. You're busy, don't answer. I don't even have voicemail on my phone. I'm not going to listen to your voicemail. You should be texting me if you think you need to communicate with me, especially urgently. And maybe I'll totally reverse my opinion, go, I didn't think I need to talk to you, but apparently there's something else going on. Let me ring you up. Let's talk, right? It's like Tony Robbins said, map the positives to the true positives, map the negatives to the true negatives, and your brain will automatically do whatever it takes to go for the good and get rid of the bad. Our problem is that we're sold the opposites all the time. I'm going to give you a weird one to illustrate how they can trick you into wanting something negative in your life. I've mentioned this a couple times, but it used to be the show Breaking Bad. This is where I learned it. Someone on Breaking Bad said something about, one of the writers had said, what we're doing is we're making you feel like the bad guy's the good guy and the good guy's the bad guy. And I won't ruin anything for you if you haven't seen Breaking Bad. But I'm rewatching right now for a writing exercise my own personal writing exercise, I'm watching Boardwalk Empire, which is a series on HBO with Steve Buscemi and company. One of the most well-written shows on planet Earth. Same thing's going on. You got bad guys slaughtering folks, typically other bad guys, but some innocent people get caught in there, and you're not happy for the innocent people to get hurt, but you're definitely happy when the bad people hit the bad people. But there'll be a situation where a cop has your bad guy, your favorite bad guy, dead to rights in a room, and someone, something happens and the good guy gets nailed. You hate the cops in this show. You love the bad guys. Not bad meaning bad, but bad meaning good. Remember that little line from Run DMC in the mid-'80s? Reverse polarity. And a lot of you know a lot more about that game. It's a big game out there. But you think, well, that's a show, man. That's not in my personal life. Really? Is it not in your personal life? Do you need all this crap inserted into your brain? One of the things we try to do on the Telegram channel is we try not to post too much of the divide. Things that are just there to piss you off, right? You don't need to see that. Oh, yeah, it's happening. But you know what? There's a divide situation going on in any utopian society as well. Something you don't approve of. And if you're stereotypical, or you might make it a racist thing, you might make it a cultural thing. Okay, well, we're going to work it out one way or the other. But you getting all pissed off is not going to help anybody. And one of the things that the fictional character, based on a real character, Steve Buscemi plays a character named Nucky Thompson in this Boardwalk Empire. If you pay attention to him and the character, the guy that plays Arnold Rothstein out of New York, chaos and craziness is happening in their lives at a monumental scale, fictional scale, right? But if you watch those two individuals, they're bad guys on some level. The dialogue was written such that they remained calm and collected as they were dealing with only a solution, not necessarily revenge. There was a lot of revenge in the show eventually, but towards the first two seasons, they were like the calm cowboy that figured out what to say. We sort of need that pause, right? Most of you have heard at some point that anytime you feel like speaking, especially when you feel like blurting out something and you're not in some fun comedic mode with your friends, not talking about that, talking about a very serious conversation you might be having with a friend, a relationship, family member, employer, especially during interviews. It's good sometimes to just, if you don't feel absolutely like you've nailed this response, pause and think about it for a split second. You can insert something like, oh, that's interesting. That's a really interesting question. Let me think about that for a second. I think if I were going to answer that question, and you say something, right? You'll never regret inserting this pause in there. Why mention that in the middle of this episode? That's probably how you need to deal with anything that you find in your life that's alarming. Oh my gosh, I am addicted to all this crap. And I don't know if I'm being short because I can't prospectively see myself outside myself. But everything that you want in life usually takes a little bit of hard work, if not a whole hell of a lot of hard work. And like Carnegie said, concentration, focus, right? I hate to use the word demonize because it's a very heavy, heavy word that we usually reserve for things that deserve the word. But in a way, we have to take all of this distraction out of our life and demonize it somehow. At least mark it with a negative. Mark it as an interrupter to other things that you really want in life, so you can actually get some of that other stuff in your life that you've been dreaming about for a really long time. Obviously, I want you to have what you want more than anything else. Hopefully you're a good person and you want good things. But if you're happy, then the world gets better. It was funny. This is an analogy for life. I was watching a YouTube video. It was the So the conclusion interviews with all the actors who were in Boardwalk Empire, and this happened with Deadwood as well. But there's a new sort of style of writing. It's been around for about 15, 20 years now. And it's a new thing for television, if you can call it 20 years new, where they start writing the show. And they've got definitely 10 episodes in the can, because you can't get a show, budgeted without at least showing the network, that's going to pay for it. You got something. But what they end up doing now is they end up writing the show as it goes. And various things. Some people are just jerks on the set and you got to fire them. And so you got to deal with that person missing, right? That happened in Boardwalk. But it was interesting to hear these folks say, it's wild, man. We just make it up as we go. It's this wild thing. And it was this huge new concept to them. And all I could think to myself was, well, geez, when you role play like Dungeons and Dragons, you're supposedly a nerd and an outcast, but that's exactly what we're doing. We sit at a table, someone's the DM, the dungeon master, and the rest of us are just characters. We're rolling die, figure out where we are. And we're just making up the whole story as we go. The interesting thing about that is it's really, people are elated because they're living some form of real human interaction, whether it be in a fictional sense or your real life. Isn't real life like role playing? It's just real. Stuff's happening to you. Again, that chaotic hemisphere of how everything works in this universe, right? It's idiotic to have schools be nothing but left brain chambers so that you don't learn any creativity when the whole world comes to you at a creative manner. When you drive to work every day, are the same exact cars in the same exact spot? Does the light turn green at the exact same time it did yesterday? Do you eat the same meal? And even if you did, does it come perfectly on the plate? No. Everything's chaotic. And so we have to harness that into our brain so that we can start seeing the world a little bit better. And then you'll start seeing how your brain's being attacked by any one formula out there. Again, if someone's peddling it through any one of these chambers that otherwise you'd have a conversation and say, I don't trust that social media, I don't trust that news outlet, be it all of them or some of them. Okay. Can you put your money where your mouth is? And then when you ingest those arteries, it's strictly for a goal. I need to talk to my uncle through chat. I'm going to reach out to my friend who apparently is now in my time zone because they used to live in Germany and now they live in Canada at the same time zone I'm in. Haven't talked in 10 years. Let's just have a conversation. That's a goal. That's real social interaction to the best of your ability because you can't get in their face easily, right? It's a weird thing to start owning your life. It really is. Because you're raised not to own it, aren't you? Just let it go, man. You can do that for a little while. Some people can even fall uphill doing that. They've got things set up. They just rolled the dice and they got a 20 on the 20-sided die, and man, they're rolling double damage. It just happens to some folks. But man, some people buy lottery tickets and win too. That's probably not you, and it's probably not me. We're probably going to have to technically own every moment of our life, right? And what's cool about it is all these formulas I'm talking about, they involve every age bracket. It's what's cool. You're young, well, you need to focus. You got to get your career going, get something pumping. You're older, well, maybe you have a lot more freedoms than folks that have to earn cash. Maybe you have your retirement all set up. Well, awesome. You can have a lot more fun with this stuff. But at the same time, I'm going to tell you again, I've said this in probably nearly 100 episodes, the only way you generate new brain cells is to use your brain. And the easier way of saying that is solve problems. And I'm not talking about world affairs and big problems. Nothing negative has to be in your problem-solving thing. But do something fun. Do something that makes you think, I watched a show on TV today. It was just a little Ray Bradbury theater. And this woman wanted a guy to build a mailbox. Just out of thin air. She wanted a mailbox. I thought about that for a second. I was like, man, I wonder if I had, a table saw and some wood and all the accoutrement that goes with, shaping wood and grouting it and whatever. I wonder how long it would take me to build a mailbox. Seems like a fairly simple chamber. Well, then I have design decisions if I can solve it real fast. Well, maybe we can make it look. He made it look like a White House front, not the side panels of the White House, but just that sort of Gothic Roman, well, maybe Greek Parthenon looking thing. It was cool. That's a little example of using your mind to challenge yourself. It's not just ingesting things that entertain you. You could read 100 books a year and still not create a single brain cell. That's why when you watch the show and you get a little bit, you're like, if I make you think about something you never thought about, that's creating brain cells. If when you come away from the episode, I make you think until the next episode, that's making brain cells. And when you disagree with me, you might even make more brain cells. It's a thing, because you're gonna be like, I don't think that's true. And then what happens when you don't think that's true? What I'm saying, well, you're just gonna start really parsing what you believe more closely than you perhaps have since you made the decision to believe that in the first place, right? I used to call this Deep Thoughts University a lot in the first 2 seasons, because I said it once in an episode. I thought, oh yeah, I don't mean to be arrogant. It's just, if I were to go to a college, the stuff I cover on this show is exactly the stuff I'd want to have a PhD in, by other people that have already been there and done that and said, okay, look, we're not here to tell you that this is a black box of knowledge. We're here to introduce the platform of the paradigm of thought we're going to talk about. You have a dream course you could go to. You would have a theoretical physics department that acknowledges the existence of ether. So you have a 0-point energy system. You have a spiritual class, and that would be, look, we're designing this college to open your mind, just like Quado said, to open your mind in a way that as you enter life, you know how to expect the unexpected without fear. You're expecting the unexpected, excited, right? I've been in several rooms. I mentioned Freud in my last episode, and it gets to the subject I'm talking about right now. And it's in movies too. But a friend of mine gave me a book, and I did a whole episode on this way back, probably about 8 years ago. And the book was all about death. And apparently my friend who gave it to me is very terrified of death. Not sure why. Nobody wants to die. Okay. Nobody wants to go through the pain of however you're going to die. That's not what I'm talking about. The spiritual eventuality of where you end up, I think, is what we're talking about. But this book was interesting. It's a little tiny paperback book, but it spent probably a third of the book just attacking Freud the whole time. Not really getting to any points that are the subject matter of the book at hand. And that's a sad thing. This happens all the time, right? Where we just sit around attacking theories. It's good to do due diligence on theories and stuff, but you don't attack theories if everyone in the room has an open mind. Say, well, you might be right, but, for me, again, traditional cosmology, traditional subatomic physics cannot explain virtually every endpoint of the existence of things like quasars and the Big Bang and dark matter. None of that actually pans out in your model. So when I go over here to ethereal sciences, half that stuff doesn't even need to exist. And of the stuff that's remaining, we can explain it. We can totally explain it. So which model do you want? You want the one where it dead ends all the time, but you feel good at Cambridge University? Or you come over here and you're like, wow, I don't have any more problems anymore in that particular area, which means I get to go to the next level of thinking. The reason why I'm widening the spectrum of this conversation is so that you start seeing life as a big playground, a big, Garden of Eden, if you will. But it's like Garden of Eden plus Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, but instead of being just chocolate, it's all the fun things in life growing out of a flower, right? It's like, I'm interested in writing. Well, there's a quill, right? There's a typewriter. There's, whatever you need is everywhere you are. It would be a really great university, wouldn't it? Employable degrees, all trade skills, but also philosophically deep. When you look at social media from now on, I want you to see it as this sort of dirty speck. It's where the dog pooped and you wiped it up, but there's still a mark on the ground, right? That's social media. Doesn't mean you don't like your dog. It's just when you play with your dog, understand poop's going to come out every once in a while. And when you do social media and you're running into all this stuff that is literally designed to cave in your brain, to make it impossible for you to have a linear thought. What happens when your brain's just like tick, 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 tock, tick, tock, tick, tock? You can no longer have a linear thought, which means there's going to be step 1, step 2, step 3, and on until you reach your goal. It makes a whole society of kids that can't reach a goal, that can't conceive of a goal. Remember when I said, think of all the numbers in the universe, and maybe you felt a little like, ugh, I hate that thought. When you tell a young kid, think about setting a goal and getting it. Well, one, they can't think of a goal. That's the first thing that's being murdered in the brains of kids. They're too scatterbrained. Nothing that matters is in their priority circle, right? But if they could, they can't think of the steps to get there. You could even sit down with them as an adult, as their parent or guardian or uncle or aunt or whatever, mentor, and say, okay, well, let's I got a manila pattern. Come on, let's do, if we're going to have to get this, won't you? And then you're going to have to get that. And da-da. You could write it all down and hand it to them. But what they see is like the host in Westworld that says, it doesn't look like anything to me, right? It's gobbledygook. It's Mandarin when they speak English, And you're not going to be able to solve it at that end point. You have to solve it way back at the beginning before it becomes an addiction. Is what I'm saying easier said than done? Well, sure. And everything worthwhile in life takes hard work. But I don't believe in diets. If you came to me and you were 150, 200 plus pounds overweight and you're like, dude, I got to get this off me, we would not put you on a diet at all, right? We would simply change the way that you eat and what you eat. Your belly will be full, but none of it's going to stick around. All that excess energy that's stored in your fat cells, that's all going to get burned out of all that sugar that's stored inside your fat cells, all going to get burned away because you're going to need it. But you won't feel hungry if we do it right. And just day after day after. In fact, the bigger you are, the more you can lose 30 pounds in a month if you're really large. Of course, that exponentially slows down, but boy, you're going to start looking good in the mirror. You're going to be like, man, this works. And I wasn't hungry the whole time. And that's how you change your brain towards social media, towards all this stuff that's rotting your brain. Watching videos that divide you. It's not that the video isn't true and that didn't happen in that one place, right? But there's a lot of games being played in the world right now, right? I'll just give you one current event example that I think is a game. What do I mean by game? It's intentionally set up and it's intentionally being supported by the local law enforcement. There's an apartment complex in Colorado that got taken over by a gang from South America, by all illegal immigrants carrying weapons, going door to door on surveillance cameras. We have all the evidence that we need to correct that problem, but no one's correcting it. That is a divide that has been inserted for some reason by some faction to either make you accept it or to make you hate it, or both. So don't play that game. Don't watch that kind of stuff. If you live in that neighborhood, well, you got to take action and do what you can. But be careful. It's all being set up by folks that want things like that to continue for the short term. It'll eventually get eradicated, trust me. Doesn't feel that way today, but it will be. We've seen this happen more than once, okay? Imagine the first day you were trying to lose weight. You're not on a diet. You're on my thing, whatever it is. Organic foods, a lot of stuff that doesn't have calories in it but has energy in it. I mean, like fat and things you don't need. Well, how are you going to feel after the first day of having a meal? If you believe me and you believe that you're going to lose weight, you're going to feel great. Man, at least I'm not doing that other thing. But you might look in the mirror and see every single fat cell that you're trying to get rid of, second day, third day, fourth day, and you still don't, you're losing weight, but you're not seeing the difference. And you might tend to give up because, man, I don't see any difference. Well, this is all crap, right? That's that addiction sucking at you, right? That's that thing in Branded, the movie, okay, that's just interested in just your desire. It doesn't care about you, okay? And the only person who cares about you really is you. That's it. I used to have a famous saying. I still say it to my friends, but I don't have a need to say it as much. But I said, look, don't try to prove something to someone who doesn't exist that you're this thing. Nobody cares really about any of us. And I don't mean that's not a cynical statement. That's just a real life statement. Now, of course, you have loved ones that care about you and that kind of thing. But let me tell you, the things that they care about are more symbolic and thematic than just specificity, right? They want you to be happy, right? They don't know what makes you happy. How many times do people, choose to leave this world by their own means and their families just mystified? We didn't know. Well, that's because you're thematic towards that person. And it's not necessarily your responsibility to know someone so well that you could prevent such a thing. And it's not necessarily their responsibility to tell everybody else what will make them happy. We have to get them conscious of their existence and give them tools and mechanisms like are in this episode, just a few in this episode, right? To go, yeah, oh, you know what, man, I didn't think I actually had an option, but I'm listening now, and it's like, you're right. We got to map the negative towards the negative and the positive towards the positive, which is oddly exactly the opposite of how I've been living, which is why I don't feel so great right now, I try to warn people about any drug use of any kind. One of the big ones is weed, right? Some people can handle it, but I will tell you, the people I know that cry a lot and have a lot of mood swings and get suicidal are doing lots of chronic. And the reason why that is that day one, you take the chronic and you feel great. Maybe you haven't even smoked in 6 months. Second day, if you stop, you're probably all right. You feel real relaxed the next day. Boy, I really slept well. You'll feel maybe a little lethargic. Who knows, right? But if you do it every single day, about day 3 or 4 or 5, you can start feeling suicidal. Why? Because the chemical structure in your brain that kept you feeling whole is now gone. It was spent on the emotional drop, the high, whether it be indica or sativa. It's been spent on those two categories of emotions, either creative thoughts or sleepy thoughts. And now you don't have anything to prop yourself up inside. The girders and the beams of the tower have been removed. The Parthenon's had all the columns removed. What's going to hold up the roof? Nothing. And you got to fight. You got to fight through that to go, okay, wow, I feel really, really weird right now. I don't feel like I want to be alive right now, but I'm going to push through because I realize it's that freaking drug I've been taking. Yeah, I feel great when I'm on it, but man, it ain't worth this down thing I'm having, right? And other drugs, cocaine, heroin, those kind of things, they have a much worse crash, as from what I understand. Okay. I've lost friends to all those drugs, man. It's crazy. I want you to see your life, to see it like what the Germans have this word called Gestalt. It's a wonderful word. Gestalt is the total picture, like almost a virtual reality snapshot of your life. It is every dimension of everything that you perceive, from your emotions to your visual intake to the meaning, the metaphor, everything, the theme. It's what a Gestalt is, right? I want you to wake up and see your life, because what will end up happening is when you want to rearrange the chess pieces to put positive where positive should be and negative where negative should be, it's easy. Now, maintaining it will take a little bit of effort depending on your perception, but I guarantee you, just like that email mistake I made, I have no problem at all nowadays rationalizing the time it takes to make sure I'm emailing the right person. For some reason, I've got some names that repeat in my life. Like I have a ton of friends named Dave, a ton of friends named Richard, it's a ton of friends named Michael. And so I'm writing like, one of those is a guy I work for, and I'll type his name into the email to send him an update. And, my email package doesn't have any idea. I mean, some of them are smart and they go, well, last time you wanted this guy's name, this is the dude you email most often, and it'll show up in there. But some of them are stupid, especially the web-based ones, right? I have no problem taking the time it takes to make sure I got the right person. A lot of time I write the whole email out before I even write in the name. So if I hit send, it's going to nobody. It just goes, I'm not, you didn't put a 2 up at the top of the email. I proofread it, make sure it's perfect, get rid of words that don't need to be there because I want it to go down smooth on the other side. I invest in it, right? But I invest in me every chance I can. The sad reality of this world today is that it is tougher. It's no joke. It's not a, no country for old men thing. Any of you are over 40, especially over 50 or beyond, you look at the kids today and you feel it. You may not know the specifics, but they're living a much harder life than you had when you were a kid, without exceptions, Getting a job, getting an education, getting a decent paycheck, being able to pay the bills, living outside of an apartment complex or living outside of renting a room, it's tough. Buying a house, seriously, how does any kid buy a house these days without some mega job or a rich parent, right? And hopefully everybody's got, some people get that. But I know people right now that have been falling uphill for so long, and their mechanisms for making money and being successful are about to expire in a really big way. And they could find themselves completely overextended and upside down, and their whole life will just go from winner to loser. And it's like, we all kind of sit there and go, dude, you might not want to do that right now. Oh man, I got it taken care of. I've never lost yet. And it's like, whew, says the guy just before he becomes homeless, right? That sphere of influence, man, it's huge. And my saying, you're good at what you do, so be careful what you do. The good thing is you can do good things for yourself, and you get good at that. So as much as that's a downer thing to say, it's also a positive thing to say. Do good stuff for yourself. Let that be an addiction. Boy, it's just like the sky is the limit. I promise you, the sky's the limit. Pick your friends carefully. Reevaluate your friends carefully. Understand, like my friendship episode, which no one ever watches. You have acquaintances that you accidentally will call friends. You really got to know the difference between someone you barely know and someone you know, because that's the difference between those two. And then you have, within the friendship circle, you've got light friends that you hang out and you discuss things with, but you don't worry about where they are on the weekend. And then there's the folks you hang out with when you have a spare moment. And then there's the friends that you call when life goes completely tits up, because they'll be there for you, whether they just can offer a nice word and calm you down or actually show up at your doorstep to help you out. You need to know who's who in your life. But you also, today, because of the toxicity of conversation, and we've lost the old adage, which is, let's not talk about politics or religion. We now just obsess on that kind of stuff. Divide. Well, you either have to communicate with your buddies and go, hey, man, I'm going to go back to that old saying, and you might even find them going, yeah, you're right. We should just enjoy the baseball game we're watching while we smoke cigars, right? Less is more, right? That's one of the best terms or best sayings ever invented. Less is more. If you're in a world where you feel like things are really chaotic for you right now, strip that baby down, right? If it was a nice, wild Bugatti car, you strip that thing down to Fred Flintstone, man. 2 axles, 4 tires, a body, a place to sit and a place to steer, and some way to propel the thing where you got to put your feet on the ground to push it or whatever. Strip that baby down and then slowly rebuild it. Rebuild it such that every panel you put back on the vehicle is a panel that's a positive to neutral thing in your life, meaning it's never going to bring you down, right? And you'll just find that, wow, when you strip everything down, one, your problems will look a lot less. There's that old saying, they said, if you think you got a lot of problems in your life, get a piece of paper and a pen, analog, and write down your problems. And then number them from most critical, horrible thing in your life to the least critical thing in your life. And they've done this thousands and thousands of times at clinics, at colleges, and these people that think they got all these problems, they're hell-bent to get past 5 in most cases. They can stretch it, but really 6 through 10 is just picking at things, right? So keep that in mind too. But I want you to take a big break from social media outside of valuable interactions with human beings. If you got valuable interactions, you're really having a good conversation with an old buddy of yours or whatever, by all means, that's good. But just ingesting crap constantly and destroying your train of thought, your linear thinking, that's a bad formula. Anyway, that's what I got on this one. I'm thinking about this one a lot, people. This is the thing that makes me most sad to exist in this day and age. It's at epidemic levels of almost mental illness. I mean, in a sci-fi movie, the amount of mental retardation I'm seeing in otherwise healthy people is astonishing. It comes in so many flavors that I just can't even, I don't know how they got to everybody. Everyone gets there a different way. But just talking to people and seeing deer eyes at the other side, it's just like we were both, I'm not pushing things on anybody that they don't ask for it, right? They'll open up a conversation and go deer-eyed in 5 seconds. It's just like, how is that possible? Maybe I'm just super bad at talking to people in real life. I don't know. But I don't think they really want to talk anymore. I don't think they have the mechanism to do it anymore. Because I do have friends that I do talk to, and I can have conversations for hours and hours and hours, and we have to basically pull ourselves off the phone. So I don't think I'm crazy, because my friends that could do it, do it. And, I can even talk to someone who believes completely different than me in politics and religion. We just don't talk about it. We talk about filmmaking and whatever for a long time, science and philosophy outside those other paradigms, and we just talk forever. So I know that these people still exist. But what's funny about it is the people I talk to who can have these conversations, and some of them are you, I know for a fact you don't ingest a ton of social media. You don't do the little micro videos that sit there for hours. Anyway, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, as I always say, you just got to realize, some of you are crawling through the old videos, and I love it when I see a new comment come in on a really old video. The comments have just been amazing. I do apologize. I will get to all of your comments. For those of you who've been around for a long time, you know what it does. It's like I go 2 weeks, I don't talk to any of you, and then all of a sudden I got a paragraph for anybody who's asking a question or making a big comment. So I'll get to you. As you know, everything's on the website. In case you're new, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't done that already. We do have a store with shirts. They're much higher quality shirts, varying price points based on the size of the shirt, so that's good. I own several of them now. And there's a lot of colors other than black. So just understand, go in. If you see black, don't worry about it. There's red and blue and all these other wild colors. But the image on the shirt has to show up in the colors. So I only skip like 3 or 4 really light colors. That's it. But anyway, to the PayPal and Patreon folks, thank you so much. Some of you have given me some wonderful donations. Just want to say thank you. I'll keep your name out of it. But I appreciate you. It makes a difference. But take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.